She had nothing left, but the cowboy still opened his ranch to the freezing Apache girl. The winter wind howled across the wide, empty plains of Arizona, carrying with it a bitter cold that seemed to seep into every bone. Snow covered the ground in a thick white blanket, and the sky was dark, heavy with clouds that promised more to come. The land was quiet, except for the distant cry of a lone coyote and the occasional rustle of dry grass under the wind's force. In this vast emptiness, a small figure struggled against the elements, moving slowly but with determination. Her name was Lita, a young Apache girl no older than 12 or 13, and she had nothing but the clothes on her back and a small satchel she clutched tightly to her chest. Her eyes, wide and cautious, darted around as she stumbled through the snow, her tiny boots sinking into drifts that were deeper than she expected. Lita's life had changed forever just days ago. Her village nestled near the edge of the mountains had been attacked. In a single night, everything she had known, her home, her family, her friends, had vanished. She had watched helplessly as smoke rose from the only place she had ever called home. She ran when she could, hiding in the shadows, and now she wandered the plains, following no clear path, only hoping to find safety. The cold bit at her fingers and toes, and her thin jacket offered little protection against the relentless wind. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, but fear kept her moving. She had to keep going. She had no choice. The sun had long disappeared behind the clouds, and the world was turning darker with every passing hour. Lita's breath came in shaky puffs, forming small clouds in the freezing air. Her fingers were numb, and her legs ached from walking through the snow. Every now and then she tripped over hidden rocks or uneven ground, falling hard into the cold. But she forced herself back to her feet. Tears threatened to fall, but she swallowed them, knowing they would do nothing to make her situation better. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, soft and comforting, telling her to be brave, to never give up. Lita whispered a silent promise to herself that she would survive, that she would find someone who could help her, that she would not let this cold, cruel world defeat her. Not far from where she struggled, a ranch sat quietly among the hills. It was not large, but it was sturdy, built from thick wooden logs that had weathered many storms. Smoke rose lazily from the chimney, a warm and inviting sight in the otherwise harsh landscape. Inside, Tom Harper, a man in his 40s, worked diligently. He was tall, strong, and had the weathered look of someone who had spent most of his life outdoors. His hands were calloused, his face tanned by the sun, and his eyes were sharp, always aware of his surroundings. He had been repairing a broken fence all afternoon, the cold air doing little to deter him. He enjoyed the quiet work, the rhythmic movement of hammering and sawing, and the way the ranch felt like his own small world, safe and familiar. But as he worked, he noticed something unusual, a small shadow moving across the snow-covered fields. At first he thought it was a trick of the light, or perhaps a coyote, but something about the movement felt different. It was deliberate, careful, yet desperate. Curiosity and concern pulled him toward the window, and he saw the figure more clearly. It was a girl, thin and small, struggling against the wind. Her movements were uneven, as if she had been walking for hours. Her clothes were inadequate for the freezing weather, and her hair, dark and tangled, whipped around her face in the wind. Tom's heart tightened. He had seen suffering before, animals injured in storms, neighbors in need, but there was something in the sight of this lone girl that struck him deeply. Without hesitation, he grabbed his coat and hat and stepped outside, his boots crunching against the snow. He moved quickly, but carefully, toward the girl, calling out in a firm but gentle voice, "Hey, you there! Come here!" Lita froze, unsure if the voice belonged to a friend or a threat. Her body trembled not only from the cold, but also from fear. She had been warned never to trust strangers, and yet something in the tone of the voice seemed different. It was not angry or rough. It carried a warmth she had not felt in days. Slowly, cautiously, she turned her head toward the man, her eyes wide and wary. Tom stopped a few feet away, raising his hand slightly to show he meant no harm. "It's okay," he said softly. "You're safe. Come with me." For a long moment, Lita simply stared, unsure if she could believe him. Hunger, cold, and exhaustion battled against her instinct to stay hidden. She wanted to run, to disappear into the night where no one could touch her. But her body was weak, her energy nearly gone, and the man's calm presence gave her a small sense of hope she could not ignore. Tentatively, she took a step forward, then another, until she was close enough for him to drape a thick blanket around her small shoulders. The warmth was immediate, seeping into her frozen body and bringing tears to her eyes. She did not speak, only clutched the blanket tighter, feeling the comfort of something solid and real in a world that had given her nothing but fear. Tom guided her gently to his cabin, opening the door and letting the warmth inside wash over her. The smell of wood smoke and cooked meat filled the room, making her stomach growl despite her exhaustion. He led her to a chair near the fire and helped her sit down, still wrapped in the blanket. Lita's teeth chattered and her fingers remained stiff, but she felt safe, at least for the first time in days. Tom went to the kitchen and returned with a small bowl of warm stew, placing it in front of her. "Eat," he said kindly. "You must be starving." Lita hesitated, but the aroma was too inviting, and hunger finally won. She took the spoon in trembling hands and began to eat, her small body hungrily devouring the simple meal. Tom watched quietly, giving her space but remaining close enough to help if needed. He had no children of his own, and yet something in him stirred, a protective instinct, a desire to help someone who had so clearly suffered. As she ate, Lita began to tell a small part of her story, her voice barely above a whisper. She spoke of her village, the attack, the loss of her family, and her long, frightening journey through the snow. Tom listened without interruption, offering no judgment, only understanding. He could see the fear and sadness in her eyes, but also the quiet strength that had kept her alive. The night wore on, and the storm outside grew stronger. Snow piled against the windows, and the wind howled like a living thing. Inside the cabin, however, there was warmth, light, and the gentle comfort of a safe place. Lita finally allowed herself to relax, leaning back in the chair, feeling the heat from the fire seep into her bones. She was still alone in the world, but for the first time she did not feel completely helpless. Tom sat across from her, quietly making sure she had what she needed. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, but he also knew that this small act of kindness could change the course of a young girl's life. That night, under the soft glow of the fire and the heavy blanket of snow outside, a bond began to form, one built on trust, compassion, and the simple human need for safety. The night was long, and the storm outside raged as though it would never end. Inside the small cabin, the fire crackled warmly, and Lita sat wrapped in a thick blanket, staring at the flickering flames. Her small hands clutched the edges, trying to hold on to the heat as if it could chase away all the fear that had settled deep in her bones. She had never known a place like this before, a place where she was not hiding, where she could breathe without looking over her shoulder, where no one shouted or demanded anything from her. The world outside had been cruel and unforgiving, but here, with Tom Harper, there was a strange kind of safety that Lita could almost believe in. Tom noticed her quiet observation and sat across from her, leaning back in his chair. He was a man of few words, but he had learned that silence could sometimes speak louder than anything else. He watched her carefully, noting the way she flinched at sudden sounds, the way her eyes darted to the door whenever the wind rattled the windows. It was clear that she had seen terrible things, and he did not want to push her too quickly. Instead, he offered a soft smile and kept the warmth of the fire between them, letting her understand that there was no rush, no pressure, only patience. "Would you like some more soup?" he asked gently, trying not to startle her. "It's warm, and it will help you feel stronger." Lita shook her head slowly. She had eaten enough for now, though her stomach still grumbled faintly. She was too tired to eat more, and too nervous to ask for anything else. Instead, she nodded slightly, her dark eyes wide as she studied him. There was something different about Tom. He was not like the other adults she had encountered in her short life. He did not scold or shout. He did not demand or push. He simply offered a hand, a blanket, food, and a place to rest. And for Lita, who had lost everything, This small kindness was almost overwhelming. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back, unsure if she even remembered how to cry freely without fear.
Tom understood.
He had learned over the years that children who had suffered could be fragile and wary. He reached slowly into his coat pocket and pulled out a small cloth pouch. From it he took a piece of soft bread and handed it to her. "Here," he said kindly. "No hurry. Just take it when you feel ready." Lita looked at him, then at the bread, then back at him again. Hesitation hung in the air. She had gone so long without trust, so long without kindness, that it felt strange and almost frightening. But hunger and curiosity eventually won. She took the bread in her small hands, feeling its warmth, and nibbled at it slowly. It was plain, simple bread. But to Lita, it was more than food. It was a symbol of life continuing, of care given without expectation, of hope returned in the smallest form. Tom watched quietly, satisfied that she was eating and that she was safe for now. The storm continued throughout the night, shaking the cabin with the force of wind and snow. Outside, the plains were white and treacherous, but inside, Lita found something she had not felt in a long time: rest. She curled up in the blanket, letting the warmth seep into her frozen limbs. Her eyes grew heavy, and for the first time in days, she let herself drift into sleep. It was a deep, dreamless sleep, free of nightmares, free of fear. Tom stayed by the fire, keeping watch, listening to the storm, and making sure nothing disturbed her. He understood that safety was fragile, that trust had to be earned slowly, and that this little girl had already endured more than most could imagine. When morning came, the storm had passed, leaving a quiet, sunlit world outside. Snow blanketed the ranch, sparkling in the soft light, and the air was crisp and fresh. Lita awoke slowly, stretching her stiff limbs and blinking at the brightness. For a moment she forgot the horrors of the past, lost in the quiet beauty of the winter morning. The cabin smelled faintly of smoke and the stew that Tom had prepared the night before. She felt a strange mix of comfort and nervousness, unsure of what the new day would bring. Tom was already awake, moving about the cabin with practiced ease. He attended the fire, fed the animals, and prepared a simple breakfast. When Lita stirred, he greeted her with a warm, gentle voice. "Good morning. How did you sleep?" Lita hesitated, then mumbled, "Fine," though her voice was small. She was not used to speaking freely, especially to someone she had only just met. Tom nodded, understanding. He did not press her for more. Instead, he offered a simple smile and gestured toward the breakfast he had prepared. "Eat something, you'll need your strength today." Slowly, Lita approached the table and began to eat, her small hands careful with the food. As she ate, she noticed the ranch around her, the sturdy wooden walls, the small stove in the corner, the shelves lined with jars of preserved fruits and vegetables, and the animals peeking in from the yard. It was a world completely different from the one she had known. Her village had been simple and natural, filled with the sounds of the forest and the wind through the mountains, but it had been her home. This place was foreign, but it was safe, and that made it feel almost magical in its own way. After breakfast, Tom offered to show her the ranch. Lita followed hesitantly, curious but still wary. She watched as he tended to the animals, feeding the chickens, brushing the horses, and checking the fences. Every movement he made was careful and practiced, showing the respect and care he had for the animals and the land. Lita observed closely, her dark eyes wide with interest. She had never been around so many animals at once, and she felt a spark of excitement she had not known in weeks. Tom noticed her fascination and offered gentle explanations, showing her how to care for the animals safely. "See these chickens?" he said. "They need food every morning and evening. They'll lay eggs if they're happy and healthy, and the horses, well, they need to be brushed and fed, just like people need care." Lita listened carefully, absorbing every word. She had always loved animals, and now she had a chance to help care for them. It gave her a sense of purpose, a small but important task that made her feel useful. Tom showed her how to fill the water troughs and scatter feed, and she followed his instructions, stumbling at times but laughing softly at her own mistakes. For the first time since the tragedy, Lita felt like she could do something right. like she could contribute to this new world she had found herself in.
As the day wore on, Lita began to relax more.
She learned to trust Tom slowly, noticing the small kindnesses he offered without expectation. He never forced her to speak, never demanded she explain her past, but he listened when she wanted to share. She told him fragments of her story, how her family had been taken, how she had survived the night in the cold, and how she had wandered through the snow. Tom never interrupted, never judged. He simply nodded, offering quiet understanding and encouragement. Through these moments, a bond began to form, built on patience, respect, and shared survival. By evening, Lita was tired but content. She had helped with chores, learned about the animals, and even managed to build a small snow shelter outside as part of a lesson Tom had given her. She realized that despite all she had lost, she had found a place where she could rest, learn, and grow. The ranch, once just a distant structure in the snow, had become a sanctuary. She curled up near the fire again that night, feeling the warmth of the cabin and the quiet presence of Tom nearby. Sleep came easier this time, and for the first time in many nights, Lita allowed herself to dream, imagining a future where she was safe, where she had friends, and where she could belong. The days passed slowly at the ranch, each one bringing small lessons and little victories. Lita began to feel more comfortable in her new surroundings, though the memory of her past never fully left her. She would sometimes pause by the window, staring out at the snow-covered fields or the mountains in the distance, thinking of her lost village and the family she would never see again. The grief was still there, a quiet ache, but it was joined now by something new, a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging she had not felt in a long time. The ranch was becoming her home, not by replacing her past, but by offering her a chance to survive, to learn and perhaps even to grow beyond the pain she had endured. Tom Harper watched her carefully, noticing every small change. She no longer flinched at sudden noises. Her eyes no longer darted constantly for danger. She had begun to laugh softly when she made a mistake, and she even began to offer small suggestions for how chores might be done differently. For a man who had spent most of his life alone, seeing a child regain her confidence was a rare and precious thing. Tom knew that Lita had endured unimaginable hardships, and he understood that patience was the key. He never forced her to speak about her past, never demanded more than she could give. Instead, he let her set the pace, letting trust grow slowly, naturally, and steadily. One morning, Tom decided to teach her how to care for the horses more thoroughly. He led her to the stables where the animals waited, their warm breath fogging the chilly morning air. "Horses are smart," he explained, "and they feel more than people sometimes realize. You have to be patient, calm, and gentle. They'll respond to kindness much faster than force." Lita listened intently, her small hands ready to try. She reached out carefully to brush one of the larger horses, a chestnut with soft eyes and a patient demeanor. At first, the horse shifted nervously, sensing her hesitation, but Lita spoke to it softly, feeling the steady rhythm of its heartbeat beneath her hands. Slowly, the horse relaxed, and Lita's face lit up with pride. It was the first time she felt that her actions could make a positive difference, that she could connect with another living being in a meaningful way. The ranch, while peaceful, was not without its challenges. Tasks piled up, from feeding the animals to mending fences and chopping wood for the stove. Lita learned quickly, though her hands were small and her strength limited. Tom showed her how to carry buckets without spilling, how to lift hay bales safely, and how to move quietly through the barn so as not to startle the animals. She made mistakes, of course, spilling feed or tripping over the ropes, but Tom never scolded her. Instead, he laughed quietly with her, correcting gently, and letting her try again until she succeeded. Each small achievement built her confidence, and with each day, the fear and helplessness that had once defined her began to fade. Evenings were quieter, spent near the fire inside the cabin. Sometimes, Lita would help Tom prepare dinner, chopping vegetables or stirring the stew. Other times, she simply sat and listened as he hummed a low tune while mending tools or sorting supplies. In these moments, she began to feel something she had not known before: companionship. She began to speak more, telling Tom about small memories from her past, The songs her mother used to sing, the games she played with her friends, the feeling of the warm sun on her village in the spring. Each story was brief, often interrupted by tears or hesitation, but Tom listened patiently, offering nods, gentle words, and the occasional smile of encouragement. Not every day was easy. Lita still struggled with her fears, especially when the wind howled through the trees or when she heard the distant calls of animals in the dark. Nighttime was hardest, when memories returned unbidden, when the past felt close enough to touch. Tom noticed these moments and offered quiet reassurance. Sometimes he would sit near her bed, quietly telling her about his own past, his own experiences with loss and hardship, though he did so carefully, never burdening her with his pain. He wanted her to understand that suffering did not have to be faced alone, that survival could be shared, and that hope could exist even after the darkest times. One afternoon, while helping Tom mend a section of the fence, Lita paused to look out at the wide-open plains. The snow was melting in patches, revealing the brown earth beneath. Streams of water ran quietly, reflecting the sunlight, and small shoots of green hinted at the coming spring. She breathed deeply, feeling the cool air fill her lungs, and realized how much she had already learned to survive. The world was still harsh, but she no longer felt completely powerless. She had a place to rest, a person to rely on, and a growing sense that she could face whatever challenges lay ahead. Tom noticed her thoughtful expression and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're doing well," he said simply. "I'm proud of you." Over the weeks, Lita began to take more initiative. She helped prepare food, gathered firewood, and even started to assist with minor repairs around the cabin. Her small hands worked with surprising skill and determination, and Tom was impressed by her resilience. He knew that she had been through more than most people could bear, and yet she still found the courage to try, to learn, and to grow. The bond between them strengthened not only through shared survival, but also through shared labor and trust. Lita began to see that she could contribute meaningfully to this new world, and Tom began to see that he could offer guidance, protection, and care in a way that changed her life. Despite these successes, Lita's past was never far away. She still remembered the faces of her lost family, the sounds of her village in happier times, and the fear of the attack that had left her alone. Sometimes, when the wind blew through the trees or when she heard a sound in the distance, her heart would race, and she would feel a wave of panic. Tom never dismissed these feelings. Instead, he offered comfort, showing her that fear could be faced and that she did not have to face it alone. Slowly, these moments of terror became shorter, less overwhelming, and Lita began to trust herself and her instincts more, knowing that she was not alone in the world anymore. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant mountains, casting a golden glow over the snow-dusted land, Tom and Lita sat outside for a moment of quiet reflection. The air was crisp, and the sky was painted in shades of orange and pink. Lita looked at the vast expanse of the plains, realizing how far she had come in such a short time. She had gone from a frightened, lost girl wandering in the snow to someone who could feed the animals, mend fences, and even face the cold and wind with courage. Her journey was far from over, but she had taken the first steps toward a new life. Tom watched her quietly, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. He had seen many winters come and go, but there was something special about seeing this young girl reclaim her strength, piece by piece. By the time night fell, Lita had grown tired but satisfied with her day. She curled up near the fire, wrapped in her blanket, feeling the warmth seep into her tired muscles. Tom sat nearby, keeping watch, just as he always did. Lita felt a sense of peace she had not known in a long time, a feeling that despite all she had lost, there was still a future to look forward to, a place where she belonged, and a person who cared for her deeply. As sleep began to take her, she whispered a small, quiet thank you, not just for the warmth or the food, but for the sense of hope and safety that Tom had given her, a gift far greater than any material thing. Spring arrived slowly at the ranch, bringing with it a mixture of hope and challenge. The snow had melted in most places, leaving patches of green grass that shone in the morning sun. Streams of water ran through the fields, fed by melting snow from the distant mountains. Flowers were just beginning to bloom, and birds returned to fill the air with song. To anyone looking from afar, it was a beautiful and peaceful scene. But for Lita, it was a reminder that life moved on even after tragedy, and she was learning that she had to move on too. The lessons of winter had strengthened her, but now she faced new challenges both outside and within herself. Life on the ranch was not always easy. The chores remained hard and demanding. Feeding the animals, repairing fences, chopping wood, and preparing meals required constant energy and attention. Lita's small hands often grew sore from lifting buckets of water or carrying feed bags that were nearly as tall as she was. Her muscles ached from bending, sweeping, and gathering firewood. But she never complained. She had learned the value of hard work, and each day she completed her tasks, she felt a quiet sense of pride. The work itself became a way to measure her growth, a way to prove to herself that she could survive and even thrive in this new life. Tom noticed the changes in her as well. She moved with more confidence now, her eyes no longer wide with fear at every sound. She laughed more freely, even when she stumbled or made mistakes, and she began to speak openly about her feelings. Yet he could see that shadows still lingered. Lita had known loss too deeply, and moments of sadness could appear without warning. Sometimes she would sit by herself, staring out at the horizon, her face thoughtful and distant. Tom would leave her be, knowing she needed these moments of reflection, but he always made sure she knew he was near, ready to offer comfort if she asked for it. One afternoon, a challenge arrived in the form of a sudden snowstorm. It was unusual for spring, but the mountains had their own unpredictable patterns. Snow began falling heavily, and the wind howled as it had during the winter. The animals grew restless, and the thin fences threatened to collapse under the weight of snowdrifts. Tom and Lita worked together quickly to secure the livestock and strengthen the fences. Lita's small hands moved with urgency, carrying buckets and stacking wood, learning to think ahead and anticipate problems. For hours they labored in the snow, side by side, and by the time the storm eased, the ranch was safe. Exhausted but proud, Lita realized that she had grown stronger not only physically but emotionally as well. She could face hardship, and she could do it with someone by her side who cared for her safety and well-being. Outside challenges were not the only obstacles. Lita also faced struggles within the community. The ranch was isolated, but nearby neighbors were wary of outsiders. When they learned that Tom had taken in a young Apache girl, they questioned his judgment. "Why help her?" some asked. "She doesn't belong here." Their words were sharp, sometimes tinged with suspicion or even disapproval. Lita overheard these comments and felt the sting of discrimination, though she did not fully understand it. Tom, however, did not waver. He spoke calmly when needed, defending her presence without anger, explaining that kindness and compassion were more important than prejudice. Through these moments, Lita learned another lesson: that strength came not only from survival but also from dignity, patience, and standing firm in the face of judgment. Despite these hardships, life at the ranch continued to teach Lita in ways she had never imagined. She learned to care for the horses with precision, brushing their coats until they shone, and feeding them on schedule. She discovered that the chickens needed gentle guidance, and that even a small touch of kindness could calm an anxious animal. She learned the rhythms of the land, when to gather water from the stream, when to collect firewood, and how to tend to the garden that Tom maintained for vegetables and herbs. Each task taught her responsibility, patience, and attention to detail, and she began to take pride in the routine and structure of ranch life. At the same time, she began to develop skills beyond the chores. Tom encouraged her to read simple books he had collected over the years, and she discovered that stories could be a source of joy and inspiration. She practiced writing in a small notebook, attempting to capture her thoughts and memories, slowly learning that words could help her process the pain she carried. Nightly conversations with Tom grew longer, and Lita began to share more of her inner world. She spoke of dreams she had, fears she still held, and hopes for the future, even if they were tentative and small. Tom listened with patience, offering guidance when needed, but mostly allowing her to find her own way. These moments of trust and communication became the foundation of a bond that was deeper than words could fully describe. Not all lessons were gentle. One morning, a small accident occurred while she was helping feed the horses. Lita misjudged a step on the icy ground and slipped, falling hard against the fence. The horse she had been guiding startled and neighed loudly, nearly bolting. Lida's hands and knees were scraped, and she felt a surge of fear and frustration. Tom rushed to her side, checking her carefully, and then spoke in calm, steady tones. "It's all right. Accidents happen."
"You're okay. Let's fix the fence together."
His reassurance helped Lida calm down, and she realized that mistakes did not define her worth. They were opportunities to learn, to grow, and to try again. That day, she learned resilience in a practical, tangible way. How to pick herself up after a fall, both physically and emotionally. Through these experiences, Lida began to understand the meaning of community and trust. She and Tom were not only caretaker and child, they were companions navigating the challenges of life together. She saw how small acts of kindness, offering a warm blanket, a meal, or a patient word, could change a life. She began to see herself not as a victim of circumstance, but as someone capable of contributing, surviving, and even helping others. The confidence that grew within her was quiet but steady, like the slow, persistent flow of a river cutting through the landscape. She knew that the world could be harsh, but she also learned that courage, kindness, and determination could carve out a safe space for those willing to fight for it. By late spring, Lida had changed in ways both visible and subtle. Her hair, once tangled and unkempt, was brushed and tied neatly. Her hands, though still small, bore the marks of labor that showed strength and diligence. Her eyes, once filled with constant fear, now reflected a cautious optimism, a spark that suggested hope was returning. She moved through the ranch with purpose, aware of the rhythms and routines, confident in her ability to care for herself and the animals. And through it all, Tom remained by her side, patient, steady, and kind, offering guidance without overbearing control, protection without suffocating care, and friendship without condition. Lida still thought of her lost family, of the home that had been destroyed, and of the village that no longer existed, but she no longer felt completely helpless. She had found a place where she was valued, a person who cared for her, and a sense of purpose she had never known. Each day brought small challenges and small victories, but together she and Tom faced them, building not only a functional ranch but also a new life. Life at the ranch had become more than survival. It had become a space for growth, learning, and healing. And through the trials, Lida discovered that strength was not only about enduring hardship, but also about opening her heart to trust, compassion, and hope. Summer had finally arrived at the ranch, and with it, a sense of warmth, growth, and new beginnings. The snow had completely melted, leaving the fields a soft green, dotted with wildflowers and the gentle movement of animals grazing. The sun shone warmly, painting the mountains in gold and pink hues during the early morning. Lida had grown stronger over the past months, both in body and spirit. Her once small and timid movements had become confident and purposeful, and her eyes reflected a quiet determination that could not be shaken. The ranch, which had once been a strange and intimidating place, had now become her sanctuary, a home built from patience, love, and hard work. Each morning began with the familiar rhythm of chores. Lida would rise early, helping Tom with feeding the horses, chickens, and other animals. She had learned to anticipate their needs, understanding the subtle cues that each animal gave. The horses had grown to trust her touch, the chickens no longer scurried in fear when she approached, and even the smaller animals seemed to recognize her presence as gentle and safe. Lida's pride in her work was evident in the careful way she carried herself, in the diligence with which she completed each task. She had discovered that her actions could have real consequences, that her choices mattered, and that she had the power to create a small but meaningful impact on the world around her. Tom watched her quietly, noting the remarkable changes in the young girl he had taken in months earlier. He had seen her arrive shivering, hungry, and wary, a child who had nothing but memories of loss and fear. Now she moved with confidence, spoke with a gentle voice, and smiled more freely. He recognized the growth she had made not only in learning the ways of the ranch but also in learning to trust and accept care. Tom had never been a man to show overt affection easily, but there was a tenderness in the way he guided her, corrected her mistakes, and encouraged her to try new tasks. Their bond was no longer simply caretaker and child. It was a shared connection built on mutual respect, trust, and the quiet understanding that they had both found a family in one another. Despite her progress, Lita still carried memories of her lost family in the village that had been destroyed. There were moments when the past returned with a sharp edge, a scent in the wind, a sound in the forest, or even the memory of her mother's song. These moments brought sadness and sometimes tears, but she no longer faced them alone. Tom was there to offer comfort, to remind her that she had survived, that she had endured, and that she could find strength in what remained. Through these trials, Lita learned the importance of resilience, not just surviving, but embracing the life she had and learning to build happiness from it. One morning, as Lita walked toward the stable with a bucket of water, she noticed a group of children from a nearby settlement approaching the ranch. At first, she felt a flicker of fear, unsure how they would react to her, a young Apache girl living on a cowboy's ranch. But as the children arrived, their curiosity and kindness became evident. They asked questions about the animals, the ranch, and Lita herself. She answered with confidence, explaining how she cared for the horses, how she helped with the chickens, and how she assisted Tom with daily chores. By the end of their visit, laughter filled the air, and Lita realized that she could connect with others again, that friendship was possible even after great loss. She felt a sense of belonging that she had thought might never return. The days were long and filled with work, but they were also filled with small joys. Lita learned to ride the horses across the open fields, feeling the wind on her face and the freedom of movement that she had never known in her short, hard life. She tended to the garden, watching seedlings grow into strong plants that would provide food for the ranch. She helped bake bread with Tom, learning how to mix, knead, and shape the dough. Each activity brought new lessons, new skills, and, most importantly, a sense of accomplishment. Through these experiences, she began to understand that life was not only about survival, but also about creating, learning, and finding joy in small successes. Tom and Lita's relationship had also deepened over time. The quiet moments, such as sitting by the fire in the evening or walking through the fields together, had become a source of comfort and connection. Lita began to share more about her dreams for the future, tentative as they were. She spoke of wanting to explore the plains, to learn more about animals, and even to help other children who might be lost or in need. Tom encouraged these aspirations, reminding her that she had already overcome great obstacles and that her courage and kindness could take her far. Their bond was one of mutual respect, where both had learned from the other, Tom learning the quiet strength and resilience of youth, and Lita learning the value of patience, guidance, and care. One afternoon, as the sun began to set, painting the sky with warm orange and pink hues, Lita and Tom walked together toward the river that ran near the ranch. The water sparkled in the fading light, reflecting the sky above. Lita knelt by the river, letting the cool water run over her fingers, feeling a sense of calm she had not known for months. Tom sat nearby, quietly observing her, knowing that moments like this were as important as any chore or lesson. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the gentle flow of the water and the distant call of birds returning home. In that moment, Lita realized how far she had come. She was no longer the frightened, lost girl who had wandered through the snow months ago. She had found strength, safety, and, most importantly, a place where she belonged. Life continued at the ranch, and with it came new opportunities. Lita began to help Tom with more complicated tasks, such as repairing fences in challenging areas and assisting with the care of sick or injured animals. She learned the importance of patience, observation, and steady hands. Tom encouraged her to take initiative, letting her make decisions and learn from the outcomes. Lita flourished under this guidance, her confidence growing each day. She discovered that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined, and that the world, while still unpredictable and sometimes harsh, held beauty, purpose, and hope. As summer progressed, the ranch became not only a place of work and learning, but also a place of joy and laughter. Lita began to play,